Oh, Owen, how are you?
No.
Hanging in there, one
Good
day at a
man.
time. Trying to launch at 19th Street lately,
Excellent.
but 2nd Avenue is our next best choice.
I think it's a great idea.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Same here.
Hello, everyone.
No.
Let's just let people find their way here. Give them a few seconds or minutes. We'll get.
Hello, I'm testing my microphone. Can you hear me? Oh, good.
Yes.
Great. So yeah, I think we'll give just another minute and then we can get started. Start with some introductions of the design team who's in the room today. We do have, I think, we already have 38 participants, so we will have quite a good, healthy group here. Please keep in mind that you can use the chat. Also that this portion is being recorded as well, so we can make sure that to fully hear and capture all the thoughts. We'll want to, I think, raise your hand to chat, or if there's an open space, just go ahead and ask questions or have discussion. Seems like maybe we've all been sorted. So I'll start. You just heard from me, Anna Hochhalter, landscape architect with Scape. Let's have the design consultants introduce themselves.
Hi, Peter Young from Hayes and Sawyer, project manager for this project at Owl's Head.
I'll go ahead. Hi, my name is Michi Ushio. I'm an architect at Seldorf Architects. Nice to be here.
Hi, I'm Harshad. I'm a landscape designer at Scape. I'll be taking your notes.
And I believe Manny is also here. Is that true?
Yes. Manny Lago from DEP, accountable manager, the Gowanus Canal.
Great. Okay, let's get started. So we are using Miro to help facilitate this conversation. So Harshat's going to be bringing us to different parts of this board, zooming in so we can see the content. And on the left here, you can see the slides that we just went through from the presentation. So if you have any questions about anything that you saw, we can always go back and look at those, talk more specifically about them. To the right, we have more of our workshop zone. So these are some of the visual prompts that we talked through, showing example images of architectural facades and treatments and approaches, showing waterfront programming, showing community programming and waterfront types. So the basic site map is here as well. And Harshat will be documenting your input on these sticky notes. So we can put them around if you have thoughts about specific locations of things. If you just have, questions, thoughts, comments, really everything. We really want to have a good discussion here. And then we have about an hour, and then we'll go back to the workshop room. Do any of the other consultants want to add anything before we just go ahead?
Go ahead, Anna.
Well, let's start with the facility. Michi, do you want to begin for us?
Sure. I mean, as Anna described, I think the way we'll structure this portion is to talk about, guide the conversation with different prompts. So the first prompt is, what is your vision for the facility buildings? Looking at some images, and these are just examples throughout the city and throughout the world, actually, of different types of facility buildings. What speaks to you and what excites you about the facility? When I say the word facility building specifically, we're talking about what Kevin Keating and both Kevins described as the head house, which is a structure above and that serves the tanks, as well as the other facility, which would be the salt shed.
Can I chime in on that?
Of course, go ahead.
This one of the suggestions I made at the other facility that I think is more appropriate here. When the Army Corps picked a bunch of buildings they thought should be landmarked on the National Registry, a couple of them, one of very nice one was the Blades Foreman Lumber Building. And it was notable because of its full concrete form with, very nice proportions and everything else set through it. And that building's been torn down. We've been losing all of the history of the canal, and people in the community are very much interested in having things that kind of still speak Gowanus. And that if we could have something that just looked a little bit more reminiscent of industrial Gowanus here in the IBZ zone. And I think that was a very handsome building, as one that could be referenced. And we do have the fact that cast in place concrete was actually engineered here in Gowanus is another feature to that aspect. That the other head house at the head of the canal just has no architectural relationship to the history of this area and anything. So if we could, and I just think the Blades Foreman's Lumber Building is a wonderful one, and you can look for that and find it in the Army Corps historic documents. They have images of it. It was torn down by Toll Brothers when they were going to buy that spot, and so it's gone now.
Thanks, Marlene. I see a hand raised by Joanna.
Hi, good evening. I am very interested in the aesthetics, but I also want to know more about the budgeting for this project. And I want to make sure that anything that's actually spent on this building is coming from a separate pot than the landscaping. And I feel like whatever we do to mitigate climate change at this site has to take priority. And if that means we end up with like a little tin shed, so be it. So I'm not sure about focusing on the aesthetics without any discussion about cost. And then I also just wanted to encourage any reuse of materials. Like the last neighbor mentioned, we're losing lots of structures and there's a lot of material around Gowanus. And if there was some way to creatively reuse some of it instead of manufacturing new stuff, that would be ideal.
Excuse me, scratchy throat. The times these days. Thanks for your question. And I don't think I can answer the question specifically about budget. I would probably punt that over to the project managers over at DP. And I'm sure that there's a way those questions can be facilitated. I think what we're really interested in are just hearing your interests and needs. And I hear you talking about priorities of function versus aesthetics in the spaces. Steve, I hear see your hand is raised.
You do. Thank you very much. And appreciate everyone taking time to be here tonight. Are you aware that this site, along with many other sites along the canal, are in a FEMA flood zone A?
Yes.
Okay. Second question I have is, do you know how deep the facilities will be going down into the earth to build the structure, the CSO head house and the other structures?
Yeah, I do. Let me just not do that from memory and look it up. But in terms of your question about the resiliency, we are going to have to raise the grade here to meet the mayor's office guidelines on resiliency. So the grading will be changed for the salt shed and around the CSO facility to bring those facilities up to a higher grade to protect them and meet the mayor's office's resiliency guidelines. So well aware of that, yes.
The reason I bring it up is because this is directly across one of the most polluted sites in all of Gowanus, maybe all of Brooklyn. And that'd be the former MGP site, which is the Citizens MGP site that has coal tar that goes down 150 feet and has migrated across the canal onto your site. And I would imagine during construction, your workers will be coming into contact with some of the most volatile chemicals known to man and are quite carcinogenic. And so I'm curious how far down their structure will be going, coming into contact with the contaminated soil.
Right. Well, just like the Red Hook site, we're going down very deep. Red Hook has also got the same situation. We are building what we call a slurry wall that's going to go all the way down to bedrock there, down close to 200 feet for the protected, the bathtub. So we create a bathtub, a slurry wall around the facility, sort of what you've seen like in World Trade Center. It's a big bathtub, as we call it. So that's the idea. So we will be going deep there. There'll be deep excavations.
When you mention a bathtub, will that be all the entire perimeter of the property?
Just around the tank. It's
just around the tank. Okay.
Right. So that's the the below grade stuff. But I think today, I think our focus is more on the above grade. So I don't want to get too detailed on that. But to your point, yes, we're going to be doing a lot of environmental borings. We recognize there's pollution there, like at the Red Hook site. We're going to have to, clean up that site.
Okay. And will those boring samples and the analysis be shared with the public?
Yeah, we can share that with you. Yeah.
Okay.
We're not there yet. We haven't done those environmental borings.
I understand. In particular, if you can share that with the Gowanus Canal Superfund community group, the CAG, that would be great.
The CAG, yes, through EPA, through yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Thank you very much.
I'm seeing that some people can't raise their hand. I also can't see people raising their hand. So maybe I'll just jump in with the question here from the chat saying, can DEP describe what access would be included? Our tour is scheduled for Valentine's Day. Owen, would you like to say more about this, or should we jump to more?
Sure. We typically DEP's had fabulous tours for the Newtown Creek wastewater treatment plant. I just, most importantly for the organization I'm involved with, is what kind of public access is going to be accommodated, if any, or is this simply just like the pumping station today and off limits? Thank you.
So the question is about inside the facility itself.
I don't want to speak for Owen, but I believe he was talking about access to the waterfront area.
The presenters haven't talked about the waterfront area, nor have they talked about the public area of the street. So it was about the building.
How many stories?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Wow.
We're getting some lag, but I think I just want to reiterate that with the question of public waterfront access, that's really what we want to focus on as part of this conversation is to hear what you're interested in.
No, that was not my question. My question was about the building, because you were talking about the building. You're talking about the architecture. And my question was whether or not DEP intends to have public tours like they do at the Newtown wastewater treatment plant. Obviously, the Valentine's Day tour sells out every year. There's other tours. So right now, as we talk about architecture, if we can get an answer to that, if that's the intent, or if they want to come back with us with an answer on a future date, that's perfectly normal.
We will get back to you with an answer at a future date. I'll run that by the DEP team and we'll get back to you on that.
Thumbs up.
Would that be of interest? It sounds like.
Absolutely. We have so many people who would love to be going down the tunnel, and we get requests all the time to see DEP's operations, and getting that as a attraction in our Gowanus upcoming community would be fabulous. Thank you.
Oh, and it's great to hear that interest in sort of the function and the inner workings of the facilities. One of the images on this board isn't necessarily meant to say, on the top right, isn't meant to say that we're proposing anything like this, but the idea might be to provide some visual transparency into the building so you get an idea of the function of the building and what's going on behind it and all that great machinery and equipment.
I mean, the more you can see, the better off everybody's gonna, you know, they're gonna love it. They're gonna visit it. They're gonna bring their school kids. I can't tell you how many people bring their kids to the recycling plant in Sunset Park, and having some sort of interactive engagement community aspect of the building itself would be fabulous. It's unfortunate we don't have that at the head of the canal, but let's make up for you know, failed efforts in the past and provide it here instead for the South Gowanus community. Thank you.
Can I speak?
Of course, go ahead.
Well, when I was living in Park Slope and I would take the F train, I would see the Kentile signage, which was a landmark for me about the area. And I understand that this land was part of was it the Kentile? It used to be Kentile manufacturers. So I wonder if that signage as a landmark, as be part of inclusive with the architectural design. And how many story is there a height for the tank? I mean, how many feet is it gonna go up towards? I mean, is that part of the design decision?
Peter, you might have to help me with this, but the building itself has a number of different components to it, specific to these big elements called degridders and screens, which basically pull up all, in an event, will pull all the debris up and clean elements like a tire. So there are elements that might be very tall, up to 60 feet, and then there are elements that might be lower that support the electrical or other MEP functions of the building. So it will vary.
Correct. That is right.
Thank you.
So that hasn't been determined yet?
No, it has not been set yet.
Then with, I mean, the capacity of cleaning the water, would that benefit as much as the eventual in 2030 newcomers coming into this area? No? Yes. I mean.
Susan, you'll just have to say that one more time for me.
Oh, no, since there's the expectation of like 30,000 inhabitants because of the developments in this area. Whereas I understand that there's a brownfield being done at 4th Avenue for developers, which is near a subway station. And there's probably going to be a lot of complications with traffic and everything else in that area. And plus this development of sewer, you know, capacity for the cleanups in this tank, so on. Would there be enough, I guess, power to sort of clear this all mess up? Besides including the Kentile signage, you know, as part of the design. It's a personal thing about having the Kentile as a historic landmark of the neighborhood.
Yeah, I think that we've heard feedback from another member who kind of suggested the relationship of a facility to the historic context context around it. And that's a very good point. As far as the capacity, I think you're asking about the capacity of the facility to deal with expanded load. And I think maybe Peter can speak better to that than I can.
Yeah, the facility itself is really more for wet weather than it is for dry weather. So your question about new development is more about the dry weather flows or the sanitary flows that go to the treatment plant versus the wet weather flows. So we're capturing the stuff that's hitting the streets generally, right, with some mixture of that wastewater. So the facility itself is not really about new development and rezoning as much as it is to capture this combined sewer overflows that are going into the canal. So I think those are kind of two different issues actually. So
it's only for wet weathers?
Correct. When it rains, we're capturing what was going out into the canal via that outflow. So we're capturing something it's over 85% of the volume that goes out there. I don't remember the exact number, but it's a very large percentage of the volume that goes out today will be captured in this tank.
So this facility only focused on one thing, not on the whole capacity of sewage cleaning or whatever that needs to be done for it's just totally confusing why the bigger issues not being taken care of compared to just rainwater measurement.
Well, I think this is more so for to collect the CSOs, to clean up the canal. Part of the rezoning and all that, they looked into the existing sanitary system and what the treatment plant can hold. So that's a different topic. But here it's just collecting CSOs so they don't dump into the canal. And as of right now, there's capacity at the station at the treatment plant. Should that be an issue in the future? Well, that will be looked over, but this is more so for what we would like to see and not worry about, other aspects of the community that have been taken care of in other ways.
Okay.
Can someone respond to Stephen Kohler's text in the box, please?
So I'm just gonna jump in here. I hope everybody doesn't mind it. That kind of is the crux of my question, which has to do with whether or not the building itself and the tanks themselves are being thought of and designed for potential scalability. We live in an unpredictable climate world right now, and while we do understand the difference between CSO and the actual volume of the incoming capacity in terms of residents, adding residents to the area. There's a finite amount of space on this peninsula in which and there's a lot of really lofty plans that are being spoken about and that we're going to be giving feedback on. And my concern is that if capacity for the actual, main use of CSO is found to be needing to take over more and more square footage of the site, what does that do to the rest of the usage that we're potentially planning for?
Well, right now, I mean, our design is for a 4 million gallon tank. And so that's what we're talking about. So we have a footprint for a 4 million gallon tank that we have, shown on our slides. And so I think I guess the purpose here today is to talk about what the community wants on the rest of that site outside of what we're putting out there for sanitation and DEP needs, right? So at this point, the tank is required by EPA to be a 4 million gallon tank under the order. And that's what we're designing and building. On the question, I guess in Steve's thing, I'd have to bring that back to others that have been involved in that EIS. I know Angela Licata, who's one of our deputy commissioners, is very involved in that EIS. So I can't answer your question, Steve, but we can bring that back. I also saw a question here about odors. Yes, we're going to do odor control, just like at the Red Hook facility. These facilities include odor control, where all the air that from that facility would be put through carbon canisters and to basically remove the odors before they are released to the atmosphere.
I see a few people with their hands raised, but before we go to that, if we could just zoom out on the chat board and remind ourselves of some other items that we wanted to have on the discussion today, Anna.
Yeah, thanks. I think Harshad, if you want to zoom in, to this larger workshop board. So we are about halfway through almost, and want to make sure that we have time to get to discussion about the waterfront experience, as well as community programs. They are somewhat related. So, maybe we can start with number 2. How do you imagine the waterfront experience? Which examples here resonate the most with you? These are, as I mentioned, they're just a sampling of examples. There are a lot of ways to address the waterfront. So I'll just open it up. Again, I can't see hand raised, so please maybe just go ahead.
Thank you, Ashley. Ashley, you're muted. No. We still can't hear you, Ashley. Let me see if I could unmute you.
How about now?
There we go.
Okay, sorry about that, folks. Hi, my name is Ashley Privett. I'm a biologist and an educator. So I'm very, very interested in commenting on the waterfront experience, as well as the overall experience for students. I work closely with GCC. I'm a biologist at the Natural History Museum. So I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I think what's most important when looking both at the building and the waterfront experience as well, the building itself, if there's any kind of signage or anything that can explain the process for students from all ages. Generally, when we look at science communication, we go with a 6th grade level of science knowledge. So anything that can sort of involve the community or school groups in sort of dictating the process of what's going on at the tank is very helpful. It allows some visibility, and also kids can sort of learn and understand how CSO works. In terms of waterfront, I'm a dredger, and I actually was formerly operating a underwater drone in the Gowanus Canal. So if anyone's interested, please reach out to me. I'm working on some more things. What's really key, obviously, is waterfront access that's accessible for both boat launches or abilities for both students to interact and actually get to the water's edge. I do a lot of work, and GCC I know is here as well, with water quality and bringing back that sort of ecological community of the past that includes tidal marshes, looking at those really important storm surge structures like you would see in a wetland, and native plants like Spartina, and I know GCC had that, but really ways of bringing back former Brooklyn and those structures that are so important to our ecological communities is incredibly important. I love the floating wetland idea. I worked with the National Aquarium in Baltimore on a floating wetland there. I know SCAPE, you guys are working on living breakwaters, which is another great project. So anything that can really allow students and the community to get and access the water is incredibly important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. I just want to interject and say also that there are a number of questions in the chat popping up that we might not get to as more of a Q&A function. And we can share, there's a specific email address set up for more question answer type items, hoping that we can facilitate more of a desire and vision conversation with this group here. I think I saw another hand raised if they just want to go ahead.
Yeah, I think that participant left the group. It was Gil Lopez. I don't know if he's still on.
I would like to chime in if that's possible. I think it's very, very important that our existing Second Avenue launch is improved. The cul-de-sac looks extremely close to the shoreline. Doesn't really look like an improvement to our existing access today. I would strongly encourage the recommendation from this group to facilitate, I guess, controlled or, BIG or the 24/7 or listed Second Avenue access to the waterfront today is in a dilapidated condition. And I've seen nothing in this presentation that shows how that access will be improved. In essence, it's actually being removed with a cul-de-sac that gets even closer to the shoreline than our open space today. Earlier tonight, a presenter mentioned how he and his son went down to that lovely open space between the roadway and our waterfront, and it has been enjoyed. Multiple uses. We've had music venues, dance parties, community events, and I would strongly encourage the recommendation to DEP to pull that back so that there's a greater, I guess, opportunity to do waterfront programming from a public street, which is already a public boat launch. It's listed on the city's websites. It's listed for access, and ideally it would be improved to actually have motorboat launches. Our organization doesn't promote motorboat use, but it's an ideal location to be able to back down a boat to be able to reconnect with New York Harbor. So I strongly encourage that as a recommendation and consideration. Tonight, I've seen nothing so far as to any consideration for that. In fact, it's quite the opposite, that it would be this small, tiny sliver. And so I can't help but say that I'm disappointed. But hopefully next time I'll be pleasantly surprised. I don't know if anybody from DEP or the design group wants to say why they wanted to reduce the amount of public space at the Second Avenue site, but I'm not going to put you on the spot. Thank you.
Thanks. We will definitely take everything into consideration. Stuff that you spoke about is stuff that we consider, have considered, and are considering. It's just about finding space for it and the best place to have those accents within the peninsula. But everything will be taken into consideration.
Yeah, a dead end street really gives you a huge opportunity, and we know that from the even post-COVID experiences at Second Street, where we not only have had music, comedy, poetry, a number of things. We've closed down the street for open streets events. Where you have your cul-de-sac situated prohibits all of that. So you're just going to deny all of the things that New Yorkers have enjoyed during COVID. And if that's the plan, go ahead, say it out loud, but I hope that's not the plan, and I hope you'll reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Owen. And I see in the chat, somebody made a similar kind of point about the importance of open space and primarily the entrance into that open space. And Owen, you're pointing out one of the entrances on the north side of the site. Diane, I see you've had your hand raised for a bit. Would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you. My name is Diana Gruberg. I'm a landscape director at Gowanus Canal Conservancy, and I live nearby to the salt lot and also have worked on the site for the past 6 years. So I'm very familiar with everything that's there now, and I would love to see, and I know you guys talked about this a bit in your presentation, but really improved facilities for everything, all the community programming that's currently there and really makes it special, including the plant nursery and the compost facility. I also think that this site is really the best opportunity along the canal for large scale habitat restoration for a lot of the biodiversity that we're going to be losing, not just with this project, but with the entire Superfund cleanup and the new development coming in. So I think we should see both, things like salt marshes, but also habitat that provides, shrubs hanging over the water and a diversity of spaces for shorebirds and the incredible marine life that we see today, even in such a contaminated water body. Imagine what it could be in the future with a clean canal. And lastly, I want to echo some of the things that were recently said in the chat and by some other folks. As someone who works on the site regularly, we have a salt shed with sanitation trucks coming in, combined with big reuses compost facility with skid steers, and then we have GCC programs, which is K through 12 students, little kids come to the site, nursery customers, and it's kind of this amazing, beautiful, wonderful combination of all these different kinds of people. But the circulation could be a lot better and a lot safer. And I think you guys are trying to put a lot into this design, which I commend you to. And I think, I agree with, I think there should be boat launches, there should be, better facilities and art and interpretation, but please make sure that the circulation really works, that it's accessible to everybody. We don't have conflicts between the different uses. And I think it can be a really fantastic jewel for the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll keep calling on people. Joanna.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Diana. You said a lot of what I was going to say, which is just that this really needs to be a natural resource haven in the neighborhood that's going to be very hardscaped before we know it. So any, absorbent, flexible wetland areas, keeping in mind, what animals we want to provide habitats for. I think it's lovely to provide public access, but I really think the human uses here should be secondary to making sure that this space is, it's a tidal estuary. We're never going to get away from that. And whatever we put in here in terms of infrastructure needs to be very, very flood resilient and yeah, just keeping things as soft and naturalized as we can. And I just was concerned to even see the wide walkways down there in the corner. If you see the Lightstone property and how it's treated and mistreated, that's just an indication of how that really hard edge just doesn't work, either for the animal or human visitors. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really glad you pointed to a specific image. Part of why we have this wider range of images is so that we can get a better sense of your kind of response to these. They're not obviously not proposals, so we're at this early stage, wanting as much input as possible. So please, if you're not speaking, because we have so many people, please use the chat to document your thoughts. We would really love to hear more thoughts on these different types of approaches to the water's edge. And then I think maybe we should jump to talking more about community program. We can continue talking about the edge, but just kind of want to get these images on screen as well so that you all can kind of focus more input in the program area.
I talk about the water's edge. I'm not ready. I want to talk about that a bit. One of the key things the Gowanus CAG has actually passed a resolution on repeatedly is concern about safety at the water edge. That we should really have some sort of life-saving equipment posted at strategic places throughout the canal, particularly places where people congregate at the edge of the canal. Right now, it's really quite frightening if you walk the canal at this point with all of that corrugated steel bulkhead lining everywhere. Low tide, you can't get out of that canal if you fall in. There's no way out. And if there isn't some sort of device to throw to somebody who may have fallen in, there's just no water safety. Fundamental water safety rules need to be followed, and it means we need equipment, and it should be posted and set at certain areas wherever you're inviting people by the water's edge. But my other concern about the water's edge is somebody mentioned earlier that you're elevating the site, you're going to raise the grade. When the state approved the construction of the Gowanus Canal, it approved it for the purpose of drainage. And they set the height of the bulkheads, the edge of the canal, at 7.5 feet above mean high tide for draining the upland meadows. I work directly across from the site. I've seen it drain during rainstorms for 15 years now. You get waterfalls, literal Niagara waterfalls off the edge of 2nd Avenue into the canal. The water, surface water is just flooding through there all the time. Water needs to drain away from the upland meadows. And the idea that you're going to elevate this site because it's in a floodplain and there's an elevation that you're supposed to have now seems crazy, absolutely crazy. It needs to, the edge of the site needs to be set for optimum drainage of the upland meadows, especially with cloudburst rainstorms and events like we had during Hurricane Sandy. Park Slope, people as far as 7th Avenue, had 6 feet of water in their basements. You've got to drain water away from that side of it also. And I'm very concerned or worried that you would actually consider raising the grade on this site. I don't know where that's coming from or why that's necessary, but I think you're impacting the drainage we need throughout the upland meadows. So I would say the water edge has to stay as low as possible in the long run. And if it's vegetative, that's even better because that's a better buffer and slowing things down. But raising the grade is set off alarms in my head.
Oh, can I go next?
Please.
Oh, just Bob Lesko. I guess I've been a volunteer with the Gowanus Canal Conservancy for about a dozen years or so. And I think they're a kind of a way to look at the programming is to touch on what we talked about what it would look like, what the space would look like along the edge. And it seems like as a New Yorker, I would say native New Yorker too, like Ashley, that it seems like we have competing interests for space. I advocate, I'm a member of Transportation Alternatives. I argue for bike lanes all over the city, all over the 5 boroughs. But seeing knowing that my sense of the reputation of the GCC, having watched hundreds and hundreds of children pass through, that I would give priority to naturalize edge and the educational opportunity we have at this space, rather than having, is it education versus recreation, as far as large group or small group oriented construction, or even the wide a bike path or a wide pedestrian path. I mean, I would love for the day to walk along the Gowanus Canal. I've toured the Newtown Creek. I've toured the Gowanus Canal over the past dozen years again. But in this case, I see a specific, almost natural fit. You've got the GCC's expertise and programming, and also a sense where we can have a low grade, just like last speaker spoke, not a built up promenade, but something that would give us access to the water and also access a laboratory of sorts for the GCC or any other organization that would want to bring in younger people to give them the opportunity that I didn't have, I would pose, of learning about nature, not when you're in your 40s and 50s, but when you're in a much more formative age and you could spend more of your volunteer time in making the city a more livable place. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anna, can I go?
Yeah.
I want to
Let's
highlight.
just go right ahead. We have a few more minutes, so if there's space,
Thank
let's
you.
just go ahead.
I appreciate the design concept discussion and the community program discussion. What I want to alert to everyone who's on this call is the fact that the pathogen levels, as Marlene mentioned in the chat, are at a level that cannot even be recorded. They're so high. To think about recreational uses or soft edges, until DEP actually is serious about containing the CSOs on the west side of the canal where there's outflow and will continue to have outflow, is kind of disturbing, to say the least. And the fact that they've been not in compliance with EPA storm sewer backup orders and other EPA Clean Water Act amendments and regulations, I should say. I mean, this is an exercise that, I appreciate we're participating in, but the environmental disaster that we're living around in the Gowanus is just amazing. And let's keep in mind, the Superfund of the actual canal by EPA is just scraping and capping. It's still going to be there. The upland sources of contamination are still going to be there because they're not being cleaned up by EPA. They're being cleaned up by the state under the brownfield program. And the citizen site, they're just scraping and capping there too as well. So let's keep in mind that we still have an environmental disaster on our hands that we're living with and will be living with in the future. And we're adding population to the community. So I just want to share that. Everyone take a look in the chat. Marlene's comment is spot on in regards to the CSOs and the pathogen levels that we're all living with and will be living with in the future unless DEP does something about the west side of the canal and the Bond Street sewer line. Thank you.
Hey, Steve. That's a great comment. My name's Josh Seifert too, and I'm familiar with all the design team members or offices here, and I have no doubt in all of your ability to make something amazing and beautiful and really impactful for the community. But I think, to Steve's point, so long as we're dealing with like unheard of and unseen amount of toxins running unfathomably deep within the earth and the Gowanus Canal, like the pollution level there has to be taken serious. It really can't just be a kind of a cap cover and let's pretend it's gone away and now the water's a happy place for everybody to be. So yeah, again, I know it's not a design and program related comment, but I think it just speaks to the criticality of the pollution levels within the region.
Josh, to your point, what a lot of people understand, the Lowe's site where the Lowe's building is a former MGP site, and it was cleaned up by the state of New York under some program previous to the brownfield program. And it's coal tar is migrating off that site. EPA has documented coal tar migrating off that site some 500 feet into the canal, across the canal. I mean, this is an industrial area that have had industrial toxins in the ground for over 100 years. And yes, I appreciate the design and the public amenities that we're looking to build here, but until the environmental issues are being addressed and seriously addressed by the city of New York and the state of New York, we're going to be living with this for a long time. And I'll stop talking.
All right, just in time, guys. I think they're going to kick us out of the breakout room. It's 8:25. They're going to take us back to our other room where we all were together. So
there was an earlier comment from the chat. Is there a construction budget and schedule? It wasn't my comment. I'm just trying to button up my notes.
Yeah,
or is that another thing that we get later on?
Well, I mean, yeah, we do have an estimate that we put together when we did what, the initial, what we call the BODR, the basis of design report. So there is an estimate. I think there's been some questions about costs. So I just briefly touch upon that everyone who pays their water bills, you're supporting the bonds that are put out so that we can build such facilities or expand treatment plants of a pumping station. So all the work that DEP does is funded through bonds, and those bonds are basically, underlying our water and wastewater charges that we pay the city of New York. So
yeah, I think the question was simpler. Like, what is the construction budget and timeline to make this happen?
I don't have that in my fingertips. We can give you that information. I don't want to give you wrong information. We have a schedule that we've published in our BODR, and I know EPA has that BODR, and I guess it could be made available to everyone here. It's a public document and it has all that information. So I just don't want to quote wrong numbers and wrong dates. We have multiple.
We look for the follow-up.
Yeah.
Let's get the information out there, and hopefully we all know what we're up for. It could be 10 years from now, 15, 20. I understand public works. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you all so much for this great input. We are about to go back to the main session, so we will document these thoughts and see you in the other room.